And I want to say it was Eckhart Tolle, A New Earth, was a very valuable book. And in this particular book, I want to say he talked about this thing called the pain body. And when he began to describe what the pain body is, and we all carry one, there's this part of us, some of us we would call it, we have different names for it. Some call it our shadow self, right? Sometimes that part of us that is operating unconsciously. But he called it the pain body because he described it as this part of ourselves that we're not necessarily aware of that gets triggered. And we go into this unconscious operation that we're not even aware of sometimes. And when we look at others and we see the pain body, and when others look at us and they see our pain body in operation, it's almost like understanding, being able to understand and have empathy for that part of that person. Not that you have to deal with it or you have to try to fix it or heal it. It just is what it is. And it's a way to see what's going on so that you don't get sucked into it. Because one of the things that the pain body does is it tries to, it's like yeast. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to today's reading with Spiritual Hygiene by Ayanna Vazant. Finally got here. It took a lot for me to get in this seat today. A few other things pulling at my attention, but I had to kind of prioritize my day. Rest was one that I needed. My body was craving for more rest this morning. And so I gave it what it wanted. And I feel good. My body's working like it's supposed to be. My mind is clear. And it's a beautiful day. I may even try to get out for a couple of hours today. Um, Went out to feed the squirrels, give them some fresh walnuts. They love it. And finally came to sit down so we can do our reading of chapter 2. Last week we talked about healing and what that looked like. We talked about how it is connected to our thoughts, how our thoughts create our conditions and our experiences in life, and sometimes how that can also create the circumstances or affect the circumstances of the generations coming after us. It all starts in the mind. Powerful, powerful. So if you have not watched last week's video, feel free to go back. It's in the playlist for spiritual hygiene. Okay. This week, we're going to go a little bit deeper and delve into another segment of that healing. First, we talked about the mind, the healing, how the mind affects the healing or the need thereof. This week, we're going to talk about one of the things we talked about when we were talking about the healing is this thing called smog, how the mind can sometimes be cluttered with things, which causes more confusion, more work to be done. And so one of those things was smog that she talked about. And so we're going to go into what that is. What is the smog? Like, and how can we overcome that? And so let's take a look. I hope you guys are well today. My name is Leticia. The station is Blood Moon Oracle. And we are going to start our session today by asking Spirit to direct us in conversations around this topic that we're talking about, spiritual hygiene. The reason why I'm even reading this book, as I've discussed in many of my other videos, is that, I am on a different part of my journey and it's a new experience, one that I didn't necessarily have a roadmap to walk on. And so there's a lot of questions I've had. This was one of them because I kept hearing Spirit say, get your spirit hygiene together. Your spirit hygiene. I kept hearing that. And I'm like, well, what does that mean? I know what physical hygiene is, the fact that we do need to take time and energy to cleanse our physical bodies, to keep it clean. Thank God for water. Like, because if we didn't have water, honey, whew, but thank God for clean running water. I'm so thankful just for the small, very simple things in life. It's things like that that cause us to be abundant, right? Just those simple things. And so when I think of things like that, the fact that we need to cleanse our body, what about the inside? We can look very nice. We have lots of tools and lots of things that we can do, to keep our hair looking nice, to keep our skin shining and glowing, to array our bodies with the finest of clothes and textures and labels and name brands and yada, yada, yada. It goes on, even to the place where we can even change how we look on the outside. And we put all this exerted effort into how we look, into the outside of our vessel. But even more so, isn't it also important to attune to the hygiene of the inner part of our experience as well? And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with wanting to look good. I do too. I put time in too to looking a certain way. But how much more important is it to make sure that we attune to the health and the hygiene of what's going on the inside? So that's what Spirit was talking about. Attune to the inside, cleanse the inside, heal the inside, dress the inside, right? Um, Make sure that you are cleansing regularly, right? And if you are an empath, you know what that means because a lot of times the empath is considered like a energetic sponge. They receive and they absorb everything, a lot of things, even unknowingly, unconsciously. And so it becomes necessary to make sure that we are aware. That's the key ingredient to spiritual hygiene. And she talks about that a lot, being aware of what's going on inside and outside of you because we are absolutely affected, even though we like to say we're not, but we are. We're affected by things and people around us. And as much as we want everyone to live wholesome, clean, healthy, energetically aligned lives, sometimes that's not possible. So, what do when you have to deal or you have to be around people that are not, conducive to what it is that you want to create peace? you know, um, Certain things that deal with integrity, and respect, things that will cause a very enjoyable, peaceful lifestyle. Not everybody is on that same page. Matter of fact, some people love drama, right? There's a term that's been coming up over since I started this book. And I was like, why do I keep hearing this? I've been watching Ayanda for a long time. And when she's dealing with people, she deal with them a lot of times. She has to go to their shadow self to really deal with them and to awaken them to their own inner existence. And sometimes it's not pretty because she has to go there with people. And I recall her, trying to help different families and, situations where there's a lot of contention brewing underneath the surface. And sometimes it's because we like drama and we like to keep a lot of things going. We like to keep, things moving behind the smoke screen so that we don't get found out, so that our stuff don't get exposed. And so we like to keep exposing other people and keep drama going. And she calls them gutter snipes. And I said, my God, today, goodness gracious, gutter snipes. And so what do you do when you have to be around these energies that really don't value peace, don't value respect and honor and integrity? Because there are people like that, And so spiritual hygiene deals with a way not only for you to be aware of what's going on inside of you, but also to be aware and how to deal with those situations that may not be healed, that may not want to be healed, that may be very comfortable in a very chaotic lifestyle or situation. This addresses those things too. There's a book that I also read, and I think it was from, what was the name of the book? It was called, now you're going to make me bring up the book. But it was also around healing. And there's a term in this book that was called the pain body. And I'm trying to remember the name because I want to give the correct information because these particular books have been very helpful in more ways than one. It has helped me to understand people and what was mine to carry and what was not mine. And this book was called, and I want to say it was Eckhart Tolle, A New Earth, was a very valuable book. And in this particular book, I want to say he talked about this thing called the pain body. And when he began to describe what the pain body is, and we all carry one, there's this part of us, some of us, we would call it, we have different names for it. Some call it our shadow self, right? Sometimes that part of us that is operating unconsciously. But he called it the pain body because he described it as this part of ourselves that we're not necessarily aware of that gets triggered. And we go into this unconscious operation that we're not even aware of sometimes. And when we look at others and we see the pain body, and when others look at us and they see our pain body in operation, it's almost like understanding, being able to understand and have empathy for that part of that person. Not that you have to deal with it or you have to try to fix it or heal it. It just is what it is. And it's a way to see what's going on so that you don't get sucked into it. Because one of the things that the pain body does is it tries to, it's like yeast. It wants to infect everything, right? So it can say, see, you're just like me. You're just as dysfunctional as I am. And so there's this unconscious mission to pull everything into its world to infect it, right? But and I think it was I want to say, I don't know why the New Earth by Eckhart Tolle. I want to say he talks about the pain body and how you can navigate these situations because sometimes it's those closest to you, and so it's not like you can just say, well, I'm just going to cut you off. You can't cut off a brother. You can't cut off, sometimes you can't cut off your child's other parent, and so it gives you a way to navigate these situations. So shout out to Eckhart Tolle, A New Earth. There's other books by Gary Zukov, The Seat of the Soul, The Untethered Soul. These are all books that help us navigate. And we're talking about a little bit of the same thing, spiritual hygiene. So I'll put those books down in the reference if I remember. Hopefully, I will remember as I go back to edit this. But let's get started. That's what we're talking about today. Thank you so much, Ayanla. I send support, love, I send honor just out. I speak that over you, and that this message through your book, through your own healing, will be amplified through the universe because it's something that we need. We need more things like this. And, when it comes to things like this, when we talk about healing, this is not a popular work, right? But it's a necessary work. Not a popular work, but a necessary work, right? Somebody has to do it. And so let's take a look. And I say that this is not a popular work, but a necessary work because you'll find that when it comes to things like this type of stuff won't go viral. When we look at the ratchet stuff, the gossip and the slander and the exposing people's lives, their personal business that has no business being on the internet, the paparazzi type of stuff. That stuff is, you can't get enough of that. And when I see that stuff, I just scroll by it. I'm like, well, that's none of my business. Why do I want to know, you know, how such and such is doing and relating to her baby's father? That's none of my business unless she comes and asks for my advice. That has no business being out on the internet when you haven't put it out there. If you put it out there, then hey, that's your business. Like what I put out is my business and I choose to. But if you have not given that permission, then that's a violation in the spirit. And that's what we're talking about, certain boundaries that we need to be aware of so that we can utilize those. That's what we're talking about with spiritual hygiene. And so this type of work will never go viral. It's not meant to, but there is a selective group that are aligned and on this frequency that understands where we are today and where we're headed. And the fact that if you don't align and ground yourself, right, we're headed in the hard times. And so with that transition taking place, like we need to really, really be aware, number one, of what's going on within each of us individually, and also what's going on around us too. It's very important. With that being said, let's go ahead and get started. So we're on chapter 2, Breaking Through the Smog. This is page 29. If you have your books, right, you can go and pick it up if you choose to. Spiritual Hygiene by Ayan Levanzant. It's about $20 to $30. Very affordable and very much worth it. This is something that you probably will want to put on your shelf, your library shelf, and maybe even refer back to it. Maybe it will have more meaning as you progress through life and through your healing journey. Maybe some things won't resonate now, but it'll ring a sense of remembrance to this book later on in life with certain processes where you'll have to or you'll want to come back and take a look, and it may make more sense then. All right, so let's get started. I hope you guys are well. Thank you for stopping by. And you are open to comment if you'd like to. You can email me too if you don't want your business out there. That's fine too. I will respond. All right. So, breaking through the smog, chapter 2. Until you become aware of what you do, how you do it, why you do it, and the consequences of doing it, you will remain enslaved to the illegitimate rulers in your throne of thought. The three most notorious rulers you will have to face and dethrone are mental clutter, emotional clutter, and spiritual smog. These forces do not serve your authentic identity or respect divine authority. They distort it. Mental clutter floods the mind with noise, overthinking, worry, distractions, and inherited patterns of thought that block clarity and peace. Emotional clutter weighs down the heart with unprocessed pain, buried grief, suppressed feelings, and unresolved reactions. Spiritual smog is the invisible veil that the invisible veil that forms when you're disconnected from your inner truth. The smog accumulates when guilt, shame, and confusion or disillusionment impedes your inner knowing. Mental and emotional clutter remains invisible until you feel enraged, overwhelmed, or stuck. It manifests as the moments when you cannot focus, when your thoughts won't stop spinning, or when you feel stuck in loops of fear, judgment, worry, or indecision. Mental clutter is the accumulation of unprocessed thoughts, unresolved questions, outdated narratives, and inner dialogue rooted in fear, doubt, or self judgment. It is the noise that fills your mind and heart, contaminating the mental space that is meant for divine communion, and instruction. Mental clutter may look like overwhelming or rather overthinking and overanalyzing. It may look like playing out worst case scenarios in your mind. It may look like replaying past conversations. It may look like holding on to shoulda, coulda, wouldas, regrets, or imagined futures. It may look like internal contradiction between what you say you believe and how you think. Ooh, the cognitive dissonance. Goodness gracious. The more cluttered the mind, the more difficult it is to receive divine wisdom or spiritual insight. The voices of the past and fears become louder than the voices of truth. Mental clutter keeps you occupied with thoughts that have no power to move you forward. So this almost sounds like just going in circles, going in cycles, right? When we have fog that is clouding our mental vicinities, our mental processes, this is what it could look like. These 5 things. Um, let's see. When the mind spills into the heart, how mental chaos pollutes the emotional body. The mind and the heart are spiritually intertwined. A cluttered mind will infect the emotional body. A cluttered emotional field can distort your thoughts. When your mental space is unclean, the heart cannot release what it may be holding. When your emotions are backed up, the mind works overtime trying to make sense of the chaos. This is why spiritual hygiene for the mind is not just mental, it is emotional and energetic. When you clear your thoughts, your feelings have permission to soften and be noticed. When you purify your mental atmosphere, your emotional atmosphere begins to stabilize and ground. Emotional clutter refers to the accumulation of unprocessed feelings, repressed grief, reactivity, shame, fear, or apathy. You start to feel everything and nothing at the same time. You may find yourself emotionally fragile or emotionally numb. Emotional clutter forms when You suppress emotions because they feel unsafe or inconvenient. You inherit and carry the emotional pain of others, families, partners, or ancestors. Woo, come on. You avoid emotional truth to maintain peace or prevent conflict. You cling to guilt, resentment, or unexpressed grief. When the mind is cluttered with worry, your emotions cannot rest. When your emotions are clogged and unprocessed pain, when they're clogged with unprocessed pain, your mind becomes hypervigilant, trying to create order. The two, the mind and the heart, are tethered. Both are affected by nature, quality, and consistency of your spiritual hygiene or the absence of it. Okay. The next part is the mind carries dust from the past. She calls it dust. Emotional clutter grows every time you bite your tongue. Every time you hold yourself back and don't allow yourself to speak your truth, emotional clutter grows bigger. Every time. It grows bigger every time you swallow your tears. You don't allow yourself to cry, express sadness, grief, whatever it is that you're feeling, or when you tell yourself to just get over it, or you allow someone else to tell you to just get over it. When your soul is asking for you to go deeper into it, to investigate it, to explore it, it doesn't always mean it has to be dramatic. Emotional clutter can also be quiet, it can be subtle and habitual. It may look like smiling. Excuse me. Oh, my throat is itching all of a sudden. When you're hurting, it may look like smiling when you're hurting, suppressing what you feel because you feel unsafe, or when a feeling is inconvenient. It may look like avoiding confrontation, even when the truth is needed. Okay. It may look like carrying unspoken disappointments. It may look like feeling resentment, but not expressing it. And it may look like volunteering consciously or unconsciously to carry the emotional pain of others, family, partners, ancestors, etc., because you think it is your responsibility to do so. When these emotions accumulate without a conscious and sacred release, they begin to alter your emotional landscape. You begin to lose access to things like joy, compassion, tenderness, and openness. You feel heavy for no reason. You feel guarded but don't know why. You find yourself overreacting or under responding to real life. This is emotional clutter. And like dust in a room, it will cloud the light of truth within you. And if I could add too, one of the things that dust does to me is it causes my allergies to act up. Like right now, coincidentally, it's super windy outside and the dust is being swept through the air. That's what's irritating my allergies right now. That's another thing that dust will do. It will irritate inwardly, like it'll irritate your senses and cause you to have all these different weird symptoms, right? That's why I'm like trying to scratch my throat from the inside out. I know it looks funny, but that's what's happening. The dust is irritating the inside of my body, mainly my sinuses, right? And so we can also apply that. Like it'll cause you to act in weird ways, right? When you're trying to suppress these things, or maybe you're not even aware that they need some type of release. The next part says the original wound and the birth of emotional clutter. Give me 1 second because I need to kind of clear my sinuses. Okay. All right. Let's see if we can carry on without the internal disruption of my sinuses being irritated by the dust. Um, the original wound and the birth of emotional clutter. Okay. How early separation becomes a core belief of unworthiness. Emotional clutter is the active manifestation of a wound that has been left unattended. From both the psychological and spiritual perspective, the original wound refers to a rupture or severe disruptance in one's sense of status of safety, in one's sense of safety, belonging, or divine connection. It is a soul deep imprint of separation that ultimately shapes our identity, beliefs, and behaviors until it is healed. For some, the wound occurs at birth. Being rejected from the womb and severed from the umbilical cord, the only known source of nourishment, destroys the sense of safety and support. For others, the wound is often the first experience of abandonment, rejection, or violation of trust that shatters a child's sense of wholeness, worth, and belonging. The experience could be a parent's absence, whether emotional or physical. It could be a moment of shaming or punishment for being authentically expressive. It could be not being seen, heard, or loved for who they truly are, with our performing to keep others comfortable and happy. Though the situation may vary, what matters most is what the child begins to believe in the moment of the experience. It is this experience that gives birth to a distorted core belief wound like, I'm not enough, or I am unlovable, or I'm not worthy, I must be different um, to be safe, or it's my fault. Emotional clutter doesn't just impact how you feel and what you do, it also distorts your perceptions and how you see the world. It clouds your vision of yourself, others, and the divine. Reverend Stephen Furtick, pastor of Elevation Church, told his congregation this: the presence of God is not where you go to bypass your feelings, it is where you go to process them because you are allowed to feel. It's safe there. For this reason, hygiene for the mind and heart is considered spiritual in nature. When old emotions linger unprocessed, they become spiritual filters. You start to view love through the lens of betrayal, guidance through the lens of disappointment, and possibility through the lens of fear. In its most dangerous and damaging manifestation, emotional clutter does not stand up and shout within you. It hides behind the veil of busyness, blame, and burnout. When this happens, there are clear signs you must pay attention to, like you'll feel tired even when you have physically rested. You may avoid silence because it feels uncomfortable and uneasy. You may struggle to access your joy, your softness, or your peace. You are easily irritated or unexplainably sad. You have difficulty trusting others and receiving love. You lash out or shut down in emotionally charged situations. Or you could feel numb, like you are watching your life instead of living it. Wow. This depth of emotional clutter forms and operates in a loop, right? When we're talking about, feels like we're going in circles and cycles, right? Number one, a feeling arises. You feel disappointed, afraid, or you feel hurt. Number two, you avoid or suppress it. You don't address it. You try to hide it or avoid it. This isn't time for that. I can't deal with this right now. Just let it go and move on. It's not important, right? We start making excuses for how we feel. The feeling sinks beneath awareness. Then it turns into this subconscious shadow like energy. It doesn't leave your energy, but instead it buries itself alive and it is stored in your emotional body. Okay. And then that same or similar feeling resurfaces later in an unrelated event or experience. And when it does, it is louder, it is more distorted, or in a moment that seems very unrelated, like misplaced anger. That is actually something that we're dealing with a lot right now with what's going on in the world. You may see that these outbreaks, these violent outbursts in society. That's what that is. It's misplaced anger. It is because there has been issues that have been shoved down and we didn't take the time to deal with them, to be honest about what was happening on the inside of us. It doesn't just go away. It doesn't. And then we judge ourselves for feeling it. The shame the shame loop begins and distorts the next unpleasant feeling. So it's just like a festering wound that just grows and grows and grows. So this cycle becomes a silent, ongoing emotional weight that affects the mind. And over time, it can manifest as anxiety, depression, emotional instability, or chronic disconnection from your own heart. Ooh, that's huge. That is huge. Emotional hygiene. And that's why awareness is so important. Awareness of what we're feeling inside. And for most of us, I could say, we grow up in these environments that don't like to, we're just now coming into a time where we see things like counseling as acceptable, right? And I think a lot of that also had to do with the mistrust of those that were um, giving this medical treatment, but we're coming into a time and day where it's okay to seek, help, to seek counseling. But all that is creating an environment that's safe for you to release the emotional weight that has built up on the inside. Because sometimes we're in environments that it's not safe to do so. We're in environments that say, "Oh, just grin and bear it. Oh, it'll work itself out." Yeah, he's abusive and manipulative, but just give it to God. It'll work itself out. But it never does. It just gets worse. And not only does it get worse, we begin to pass on that dysfunction to the next generation. And so it not only does it fester and grow, but it begins to morph into something a little bit more resilient, because I believe every time we pass it on to the next generation, it turns into something different, maybe even something a little less noticeable, right? Because it becomes ingrained in the very sense of our being, which is scary, right? And just using abuse as an example of things we try to sweep under the rug for many different reasons, from religious reasons to familial value systems of it, believing that it's better to be taken care of than it is to have to take care of yourself and struggle. Therefore, I'll take the abuse. I'll deal with it. That cannot be further from the truth. Again, I would rather struggle on my last leg than put up with someone else's BS, someone else's outpouring of their own low self esteem. That's not our job, right? Our job is to care for ourselves and to heal and protect ourselves, not to carry the weight of others. It's everybody's individual responsibility to do their healing, to do their work. And sweeping it under the rug or ignoring it or hoping that it just automatically just gets better. It doesn't. If you never challenge it, if you never point out that that's wrong or this is how that makes me feel, it doesn't feel good, right? If we never bring that up, and yes, it may rock the boat, it may cause, a huge explosion. It may even cause separation, may even cause, divorce in some cases. Well, so be it. Because if you can't pull yourself together enough to not drag me into your pain body, then that's something that you need to work out on your own. I don't need to be a part of that equation. And that's what love looks like sometimes. Love looks like walking away so that you can work out your own issues. And just using that as an example, but it doesn't just go away. Then she says emotional clutter has a high spiritual cost. Emotional clutter does not mean you are broken. That's not what that means. It means there is something within you that longs to be felt, heard, or freed. Unprocessed emotions block your ability to hear divine guidance clearly. Again, they dull your intuition and keep you attached to the memories, wounds, and trauma of the past. In the absence of mental and emotional spiritual hygiene, you mistake your emotional reactions for divine revelations. You confuse fear with discernment. You spiritualize your self protection by calling it wisdom. The truth is, you cannot embody divine clarity if your emotional field is chaotic. You cannot be a sanctuary of light while living in the darkness of emotional congestion, right? Therefore, sometimes separation is needed for your own mental health. Listen, and if you find it difficult to be alone, then we have a problem. We have a problem. Because if you can't even be with yourself, how are you going to make it work with somebody else? We have a problem. Emotional clutter is the fuel that feeds emotional dishonesty and the ways we lie to ourselves and about ourselves. The reason emotional dishonesty is so pervasive on the internal landscape of so many people in today's world is that few of us recognize the distinction between an emotion and a feeling. The two are similar, but in the realm of spiritual hygiene, for the mind and heart, they are distinct. The distinction between feelings and emotions, the moment's message versus the moment's echo. Okay, that's how she describes it. And she says, as a student of A Course of Miracles, I am a firm believer in its teachings that there are only two emotions, love and fear. At the same time, I am aware that the average person embraces a reality that is concrete and fixed. This reality is based on what is already known, which sets the stage for what is expected and anticipated. And this third dimensional reality, what you know is what is, period. It is this interpretation of reality that blurs the distinction between feelings and emotions. From the perspective of spiritual hygiene, giving credence and deference to traditional psychology, emotions tell the truth of the moment. Feelings carry the memory of past woundings. Every wound has a story that is waiting to be told and witnessed. An emotion is a pure, instinctive, momentary signal generated by the nervous system. It is a subtle, brief, and deeply honest whisper or nudge from the soul. Emotions arise as a distant response to what is in front of you and reoccurring in the present moment without the layers of interpretation or memory. Emotions are chemical reactions triggered by your perception of what is going on. For example, you might feel a sudden tightness in your chest when someone speaks unkindly, or a flutter of warmth when you hear a child's laugh. An emotion will only last a few seconds to minutes unless it is resisted or suppressed. Emotions signal alert, protect, and connect. They are the body's first language and are not burdened with meaning or wrapped in defense. They are simply the truth in motion, in the moment, within your body. Emotions are the body's way of saying, this is what is happening in me now. When acknowledged, an emotion will rise and dissipate like a cloud passing across the sky. This is a foundational teaching of mindfulness, a practice of the Buddhist faith, where observing rather than engaging emotions is a path to peace. When we are spiritually clean, we can acknowledge and name an emotion, allowing it to move through our mind. When, however, we develop the practice of habit of suppressing or ignoring our emotions, especially the tender ones like grief, joy, desire, vulnerability, they will happen and become something heavier. They become less like clouds and more like storms. When this happens, it means a feeling has begun to take root. Okay, so emotions are subtle flights of energetic experiences that passes through really quickly unless we're unaware. And when we're unaware, they may take root and turn into feelings, right? You know how sometimes we say we catch feelings? Somebody has caught feelings. That means there's something a little bit deeper that has taken root. It's not something that is just passing by, but it's taken root. Now, when we talk about feelings, a feeling carries the echoes of unspoken stories and have a deeper energetic response, one that has been shaped by history, memory, belief, and meaning. Feelings often rise when an emotion is not fully felt or understood, They are labels we give emotions and often come with a story attached. Unlike the momentary rise and fall of an emotion, feelings linger. They carry the echoes of wounds we have yet to heal and truths we have been unwilling to tell. Where an emotion might say, I'm hurt, a feeling will scream, I'm always abandoned. No one really cares about me. Because they are deeply connected to our experiences and stories, feelings are sacred. But when they are not always reliable, but they are not always reliable, they are truthful in that they reflect something real in our experience, but they are also tainted by the past. They can protect, project, and deceive you into believing that you choose to believe rather than what is true or possible. Let me read that again. They can protect, project, and deceive you into believing what you choose to believe rather than what is true or possible. You might feel justified in your anger in the moment. However, the story, memory, and emotions underlying the current anger could be a long-standing resentment, shame, or grief that you have never felt permitted to express. You might feel uneasy around someone, and the emotion that arises is fear, but that emotion may not be about them in the moment. It may be the echo of an old story that is being triggered now, inviting you to revisit an old wound that has been reawakened. If what gets triggered is a past betrayal, rejection, or breach of safety, that emotion will be elevated into a feeling. When we are young, we don't just witness experiences, we absorb them. When we live in environments shaped by violence, silence, chaos, or betrayal, our tender young minds form meaning from what is required to survive in those environments. We craft meaning from the ways we are treated and how we observe the interactions between those in power. Those meanings, it's my fault, there's nothing I can do, love is dangerous, help won't come, becomes the thought forms that occupy the throne in the sanctuary of the mind. Hmm. They also become the emotions that leak into the sanctuary of the heart because they're intertwined. In this way, the past becomes a sacred agreement of sorts that we are unaware we have made as we begin to practice spiritual hygiene, becoming aware of our mental and emotional partners or patterns, excuse me. We can hold them up to the light of truth and ask, is this the voice of my soul or an echo of survival? Is this the voice of my soul or an echo of survival? Is what we can ask ourselves once we become aware of our patterns of thought and feeling. So, now to talk about spiritual smog specifically, the clouded temple. When clarity is lost and the inner light is dimmed, that's what smog is. Lost clarity and a dimmed light. In the physical world, smog is defined as air pollution that reduces visibility. It is smog made heavier by smoke and chemical fumes. In the spiritual realm, smog is an invisible haze that forms when the mind, heart, and spirit becomes congested with unresolved thoughts, stagnant emotions, false beliefs, energetic entanglements, and aligned behaviors. Like pollution in the atmosphere, spiritual smog clouds your sense of inner clarity, dulls your intuitive knowing, and distorts your perception of who you are, what it is, and what you're responsible for at any given moment. I am sure that you, like me, have heard people say things like, I just can't take it anymore. In those instances, the it is everything in or about life. Or, I don't know what is wrong with me. While they may not be able to put their finger on it, they do know that something is off. These are sure signs that their mental clutter is out of hand. Their emotional clutter has become too heavy to carry, and there is spiritual smog hovering over their internal and external experience. Spiritual smog forms in certain circumstances. Like if you're mentally overloaded with information, but are spiritually undernourished, like you have information, but the spiritual part is not being nourished to balance out that information, right? I guess we could say wisdom is the balance between knowledge and spiritual nourishment, right? You are emotionally burdened, but spiritually disconnected. You maintain outer routines, but neglect inner alignment. Maintaining outer routines, but neglecting inner alignment. You speak spiritual language, but suppress emotional truth. You live by reaction rather than authentic self expression. Like all of this feels to me, if we're looking on the outside, it feels like that. Like having the outer parts all together and very clean, looking very good. But then on the inside, it's a disarray and unorderly and just very unkept, right? But it looks good on the outside. It sounds good, but there's no real expression of connection within, right? Kind of like I was explaining, the idea around having money or having some form of privilege or access does not necessarily demonstrate alignment, right? Because you can have an abundance of things that can cause you to live a very abundant life and be the most chaotic person that ever walked the face of the earth, right? Look at Hollywood, confusion on the deepest level. I always have a high level of respect for people that are in Hollywood that produce movies that are very well known, but you never see them in the tabloids. You never catch any glimpse of their personal lives being sprouted and splurted across the internet that is because they hold a very heavy level of hygiene when it comes to their lifestyle. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they have it all together, but there is a sense of boundaries that they hold somewhere to be able to keep that boundary in place, right? And so this is like everything looking really good on the outside, but then there's just chaotic on the inside. There's no order, there's no sustenance on the inside. And when that's the case, like anything that comes along can knock you off balance. Like the slightest little thing could come along and set you off. And you're just like. And so I feel like that's how that would look in if we're looking at it from a perspective, a visual perspective. It looks good. We have all the information, but it has not sunken into a place that it has taken effect on our lives and provided results that help. This is what it looks like when smog forms. There's a lot of unclarity happening on the inside. And like mental and emotional clutter, spiritual smog creeps into the mind and heart over time. It doesn't just happen, but it's a thing that happens over time. And again, to undo that, we can't expect for that to be undone immediately. It will be something that will be undone over time as well. By the time you realize that something is not quite right, the smog is showing up and out as a lack of joy or inspiration, again, feeling stuck, decision fatigue or back and forth in decision making, right? Persistent doubt or confusion, feeling cut off from your inner guidance, and at its worst, isolation from the people and activities you once loved. Hmm. Spiritual smog is what takes over when your inner temple is cluttered, but your outer life keeps moving. Stillness is replaced by people pleasing or obligatory performance. In addition to an overwhelming yet understandable amount of mental clutter, it becomes quite apparent that Nisa's life had been unfiltered by spiritual smog, according to Michael J. Lincoln, PhD, in his book, Messages from the Body. Their psychological meaning. Diabetes often relates to themes of disappointment, loss of control, and the need for deeper self awareness and acceptance. Ooh, let me first say that we need to be careful too, because some of these things are necessary, right? And it's being aware of what's happening within your body. Just because these things show up doesn't mean that you're experiencing physical smog, because sometimes some of these things are necessary to get the clarity, to free yourself from this emotional clutter, right? Because when she talks about things like separating, isolating from people or activities, sometimes the people and the activities, if they are the cause of these ongoing loops, it becomes necessary to separate yourself, to free yourself from this form of cycles that you've been stuck in. And so it's necessary for you to understand the difference, right, between doing something to create a level of freedom from the bondage that you've been in and doing something because you're trying to avoid getting free. Okay. Because you don't even really see the need to get free. That's the difference. And then she goes in to talk about what the spiritual smog actually can produce in the body. She brings back up her daughter, who we discussed in the last chapter, at a very lengthy measure, and how her daughter chose certain paths that she wasn't necessarily in agreement with. But spiritual hygiene taught her to acknowledge that her daughter has her own path and has her own life to live and has her own choices that she is able to make around her own body and her own life. And accepting that is part of acknowledging, spiritual hygiene, good spiritual hygiene, if I could say that. But going into describing from a doctor's perspective that has studied the spiritual aspect behind physical diseases that show up in the body. She suffered from diabetes. There's a doctor by the name of Michael J. Lincoln, wrote a book called Messages from the Body, Their Psychological Meaning, talked about diabetes often relating to themes of disappointment or feeling a loss of control or the need for deeper self-awareness and acceptance. And it makes sense because we have to really look at things in the total perspective. Like we could see it develop in the physical, but remember, everything starts here. It doesn't just appear. There was some root in the mind that started what actually appears in the physical. If that is true, and it is, then we can trace that back when we start to develop these symptoms in our body to something that happened spiritually, mentally, emotionally. And doctor is saying that this traces back to feelings of disappointment, diabetes, feelings of disappointment, loss of control, and the need for a deeper self-awareness and acceptance. And that could be, as far as not being able to really, I'm gonna just simplify it, like having to really boil down to a level of discipline, right? Which we all deal with that at some point in life. When we're young, we're able to we feel very vibrant, and like life is never going to end. There's a sense of feeling very resilient. When we're young, we can eat whatever we want. We don't really have to exercise a lot. But the older we get, the less our body tends to be resilient. And we begin to have to be a little bit more disciplined with what it is that we may have really enjoyed in life, like sugar is a big one, salt, the greases, those unhealthy greases, like all of those things that taste good that we have been taught to enjoy. Our palates, our taste buds, our palates are something that we teach it, just like everything else. It's formed as we're growing up according to the foods that we were given to eat. That's how we develop our taste buds. But later in life, if it wasn't necessarily healthy habits, it becomes difficult. The older we get, the more difficult it is to break away from those habits. And so when we talk about the awareness in our bodies, the self-awareness and the acceptance, it could be around having to change some things that we've enjoyed, right? Disappointment, loss of control. But even more than that, it could also be around other issues in life that's causing us to feel this way. That could be developing these symptoms within our body that we have come to call diabetes. which is a resistance to a certain chemical that is used to producing in our body. And we call that insulin, right? And so I'm not going to go deep into it, but this doctor has really, I guess, has broken this down. His interpretations link the physical manifestations of diabetes to the inability to process life's sweetness or joy. Linking it to the family, Dr. Lincoln suggests that disease stems from the experiences of not receiving the sweetness one deserves. It can also be seen as a call to address deeper emotional or spiritual imbalances and to find strength and meaning and faith and spirituality during the management of the condition. So there's a deeper cause going on. There's something deeper happening on a deeper level, on a spiritual level, on an emotional level, even though we've called it diabetes, which says, okay, so you have to drastically change the way that you're eating, what you're eating, get exercise, get the right amount of sleep. But there's something deeper going on here. There's a psychological imbalance that's happening between these particular pillars in life. Okay. The unseen weight of dust and clutter is another topic. She talks about how emotional congestion becomes emotional dishonesty. There is a space between what we know and what we say, between what we feel and what we express. This space, often silent and swollen with unspoken truths, is where emotional dishonesty lives. The heart, when clogged with emotional dishonesty, becomes a heavy, reactive place. When this is cleared through self awareness and self honesty, it becomes a chalice, a holy cup of compassion, clarity, and love. The truth must be integrated into the emotional body, into the wounded places where feelings have been muted, distorted, or buried. It must touch the crevices and chambers of the heart where sorrow has been swallowed, where joy has been suppressed, where needs have been silenced until they echo as suffering. And this is why expression is so important, whether you do that outwardly, right? There's some of us, I feel like she's one of them that's been called to heal outwardly. That's why she's sharing this. Not everybody is called to heal before the world, but you could also journal. Huge, very effective. It is still pouring out those emotions. Even though you're not sharing it with everybody, you are pouring that out and expressing it out on the page. The journal doesn't have to be written. It could be a spoken journal that you have, that you keep. It could be a social media journal that you have, that you keep, right? And you don't have to share it with everybody. Like you could keep these things to yourself as a mental record of this process that you have gone through. But it's important to be honest. That's what she's talking about, being honest about what it is that we're experiencing, what we're feeling, the need for healing. Being honest about that. Being honest that everything is not always okay. And it didn't start okay for a lot of us. But we've come to a place where if we can see it, then we can help ourselves to position for healing, right? Part of that is being honest, emotional honesty, and being willing to express that. She says there's a space between what we know and what we say, right? Sitting there knowing, and I'm gonna stay on this topic of abuse, right? Sitting there knowing that you are connected with somebody. It could be family, it could be a friend, it could be just someone that you are connected to in some type of social setting, and you know there's abuse. You see the signs, you see the marks on the body, you see the reaction, the change up in posture and energy when a certain person comes around. You know that there's something wrong there, and you choose not to say anything. The difference between what we see and what we say, what we feel and what we express. This space, often silent and swollen with unspoken truths, is where emotional dishonesty lives. And not that it's our responsibility, but why is it hush hush? That's what she's talking about. The reason that keeps us quiet. And that could be about us too. The fact that we are experiencing some level of abuse that we are not courageous enough to confront, that we deserve better. We're not courageous enough to, stand up to. Does it mean that you may have to go through some difficult times? Yep, it does. I'm going to be really real, but it'll be worth it in the end when you finally have peace of mind. And I'm just using that as an example. But emotional honesty is what she's talking about here. When we look at the weight of this dust and clutter that keeps us in these cycles, that keeps us in this level of unclarity with things that matter. It matters. And sometimes these things end up turning into ailments in our bodies because our bodies are able to communicate with us as well. And so when the heart remembers, she says, a mother's realization, when the heart remembers, the place where our children reflect what we've hidden from ourselves. And this goes back to, the last video I did, where she talked a lot about having to really deal with her unspoken pain showing up through her daughter. And so what she thought she had hidden actually didn't. It still surfaced through her daughter, louder than ever. And it was a hard truth as you go back and listen to the last video. It was a difficult video, and that's what we're talking about. When the heart remembers, a mother's realization, the place where our children reflect what we've hidden from ourselves. Even if we never even come to the point where we're courageous enough to speak our truth, or we're courageous enough to confront what needs to be confronted, it will surface sometimes in the next generation, right? Sometimes around us, in the relationships around us, but it will surface. You cannot achieve true spiritual hygiene through truth telling at the mental level alone. The mind may acknowledge, but it is the heart that remembers. Where the heart has been trained to lie to stay safe, truth must be reintroduced gently, compassionately, and consistently. I did not know how to do this with Nisa. Instead of safety, I attempted to give her structure. Instead of gentle honesty, I offered her correction. I gave her rules that I believed were helpful. I learned that for her, they felt like demands for perfection. I wanted her to grow. I wanted her to succeed. I eventually came to realize that I wanted her to be okay enough to make me feel like I had done all the right things, the perfect mother things. I am now aware that at first I wanted her to make me look good as a person. Later, I wanted her to look and feel good about herself. Both unconsciously, both unconscious needs were laced with love. They were also tinged with expectation, and she felt it. She once told me, I never measure up to you. I told her I had no expectations of her or for her. I just wanted her to be happy. I am now aware that my speaking was dishonest. I did have expectations, subtle ones, energetic ones, unspoken ones. I wanted her to rise out of what I perceived to be her slump because I had not yet forgiven the part of me that had fallen. I wanted her to shine because I had not yet acknowledged, accepted, or blessed the places in me that were stiff and still in the shadows. As my light became, as my light began to shine brighter, Nisa's began to shrink. Not because she lacked brilliance, but because she did not feel safe in my reflection. Ooh, because there was still a part, I feel like there's still a part of Ayanda that was very much still hidden and unacknowledged. And Nisa felt it. Nisa was the product of it. She says, Nisa was my mirror. So no matter how much Ayanda tried to hide or deny or ignore, it comes out anyway. reflected in her daughter what she refused to see. Nisa was my mirror. She was the one of my children who reflected to me the places of myself that I had disowned, the emotional weight, the longing to belong, to be accepted, the silent suffering, the shame, the survival, the hunger to be affirmed was in fierce competition with the fear of not being enough. When I realized what was going on within me and between us, it broke my heart. It also cracked my heart wide open. I realized that Nisa didn't feel unwanted because of anything I said or did. She felt it because I was still rejecting the parts of myself that she embodied. Children feel energy. They may not always have the words to explain or describe it, but they know when love is knotted with anger, fear, denial, or avoidance. I always say that children bring to life the unconscious issues of their parents because they live in their bodies. Most parents resist the notion of this, but the truth is, our children know us from the inside out. And Nisa knew I loved her, and she also felt my fear of her pain because it mirrored my own. Ooh, oh, I can't even begin to speak to that. All I could do is nod and say yes. Truth. Ooh, that's true. The beautiful part of that, though, is to acknowledge that and to release that, is to be open to ourselves. Again, to be willing to heal and acknowledge and do the work within ourselves. It's just that easy, right? That will be reflected through them as well. Yes, it will. Without having to do anything, just doing the work within ourselves will be reflected through them in the same way that our denials of the need for healing is reflected through them. That's the beautiful thing about that. Then she says, my awareness of all that was going on beneath the surface, all that was affecting and impairing and impacting my relationship with my baby girl, pushed me deeper into my own spiritual hygiene. I worked on my own need to forgive myself for who I had been when she was becoming. I had to affirm her. I understood why I had to affirm her, as she was not for what she could become, as she was not for what she could become. I had to acknowledge and bless her broken yet brilliant self, not despite her brokenness, but because of it. I had to accept that, like me, my daughter, who had lived in my body, was also learning how to survive a lineage of unhealed pain. Journaling had become a major aspect of my spiritual practice. Through journaling, I eventually realized that my relationship with Nisa's father was not safe or healthy for me or my three children. It would not be accurate to say that we argued. He was 6'4", he was 6'2". I was 5'6". He weighed a good 240 pounds. I was a solid 135. He didn't argue because the moment I attempted to respond to his accusations of unfaithfulness or disrespect of his manhood, he would grab me by my throat and whisper in my face what a bitch I was and how easy it would be for him to. I would fight him off silently, punching and scratching without a sound, hoping that the children wouldn't walk in on us. On those rare occasions when he didn't choke me, he would put me in the choke hold, drag me into the bedroom, and threaten to unalive me if I opened my mouth. We didn't argue, but we did fight. Perhaps it would be more accurate to say I got beat up. He would knock me down, threaten to kick me, or tell me if I moved, he would choke the shit out of me. I knew to stay in a fetal position to protect my face and my ribs. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it did not. Over time, I learned how to reduce lip swelling and conceal a black eye. But the children would ask me, what happened to my face? And I would say, nothing. I'm okay. My mind was filled with imprints and scripts that made violence in my home acceptable. I had never seen a woman leave a man because of his violent behavior. I had a deep desire to leave, but my spiritual and mental hygiene practices were not strong enough to support my desire. Where would I go? My father made it clear that I had made my bed, so I would have to lie in it. Her father made it clear. Make that make sense. The protector. The protector. Fathers, uncles, brothers are supposed to be guardians of the gate. And here, the response from a father recognizing that his daughter is being abused is, you made your bed, now lay in it. Generational pain. My father made it clear that I had made my bed, so I would have to lay in it. My brother told me it was none of his business. My stepmother encouraged me to get out. However, she was also very vocal about her fears that he would eventually unalive me, whether I left him or not. My poor mental hygiene and lack of physical support took their toll. With no plan, few resources, and a limited amount of courage, it took me 3 years to leave. The truth is, he left me after I stabbed him. Whew, tears is welling up in my eyes because you don't know how many people deal with this foolishness. And this foolishness. Who told you that you're supposed to be on the bottom of somebody's shoe like a piece of gum? Who told you that? It's evident right here that it's inherited. It's inherited. And the saddest part about this is that she didn't even have anyone to turn to. The very people that's supposed to be her support system threw her out to the wolves to fend for herself. Ooh, I gotta take a minute. I'm so glad that I had people like my grandmother who she had been married a few times, but she understood and she didn't take no mess. My grandma used to, I'm not gonna tell you what she used to do, but she was a no nonsense type of woman. She wasn't taking no mess. And if that meant she had to be alone and raise her kids alone, that's what she did to the best of her ability. And her love was more than enough. You know why? Because all of her grandbabies would rather be with her than to be at home. That means that she did something right. And there's a legacy that she left, a legacy of love. Very compassionate woman. And she had a heart of gold, very hospitable. She would take anyone in and feed them. Wasn't stupid though, but she was very compassionate because she believed that what you do unto others, you do unto yourself. And so she believed if she took care of people, then after she's gone, then people would remember that. And if they didn't, there's a thing called karma that will come back around and make sure that hers was taken care of. And she handed that down. And I think that's really a thread that is sewn through my family. There's this thread of hospitality. You know, you'll find each of as I look around in my family, like everybody has that very compassionate heart when we look at others. Mostly you will find people that's taken on other people's responsibilities, raising other people's kids when they don't have to. But that's something that was handed down from my grandmother, from her mother. And so I'm so thankful. And I've had my share of situations, you know, where I was put in situations where I had to choose myself. But I'm so glad that I did have people that I could turn to. Now, on the other side of that, I also have people that were not in position, right? As I was talking about, the father is supposed to be like the gatekeeper, the protector, the uncles, the brothers, right? And so I did have a lack of um, the support, but I did have enough to love myself enough and to have the support to love myself enough and my children, right? And to make the best decision because I feel like I've been tempted to stay in situations where if I would have, it would have gotten worse than it did. But unfortunately, I had enough sense, I had enough support, and I had enough protection spiritually to pull me out of those situations. And I tell this story often in my personal testimonies that there were things that happened in my life that was kind of like interventions, spiritual interventions. Had I had it my way, I probably would have stayed in very dysfunctional situations, but there was things that happened that separated me from those potential situations. And I'm so glad. But to look at this and to hear this, it's painful to hear that even your father would tell you something like that in light of you being abused, in light of your children being abused, because it's abuse. If you have to sit and watch, if you have to live under the same roof where your mother is being abused, that's abuse. In the process of healing my pain, I learned Nisa did not enter this earth to teach me how to be a perfect mother. Her life assignment was to help me remember how to be a truthful one. She taught me how to accept and finally admit, right? This is why the mirroring happened through Nisa. This is why the very painful reflection had to be cast back to Ayanla through her baby girl, because she was there to cause Ayanla to admit that she was hurt because she had not yet healed. That's why it was showing up in Nisa. The truth was not the end of our healing. That truth was not the end of our healing. It was the beginning. God's grace, her freedom, my return. The truth that I had hurt my child did not destroy me. It delivered me. It lifted the veil of emotional dishonesty that I had unknowingly placed between my heart and hers. As the veil lifted, I gained a profound understanding. Emotional dishonesty doesn't always manifest as lies. Sometimes it shows up as silence. We don't say what needs to be said. Omission, right? Sometimes it shows up as pretending like everything's okay, putting on a mask, or deflecting, or, that drama demon, right? We was talking about the gutter snipes. That's deflecting because we don't want to deal with what's happening on the inside of us. So we would rather project those problems outwardly and pull people into our pain. Sometimes it shows up as over explaining, trying to, that's that people pleasing, that trying to get people to like us, to understand us, to do all the right things, right? It showed up for me as the mimicking by Nisa, as saying, I'm fine, when our souls were aching. It can even show up in our attempts to love someone who reflects to us the parts of ourselves we have not yet learned to love. Nisa was this mirror for me. I now understand that I was once interpreted as manipulation or resistance was. Nisa was that mirror for me. I now understand that what I once interpreted as manipulation or resistance was, in truth, her way of surviving a reality in which was never fully felt. It was never felt fully safe to be herself. Her behavior was not a betrayal, it was a code. It was her asking in her own way, can you see me? Even if I can't tell you the whole truth. Ooh, that's deep. That's deep. And so that mirror reflected back to her. And in some way, in a deeper level, that was her speaking back to herself. That was Ayanla in her daughter Nisa speaking back to her, Ayanla, asking, can you see me? Is it safe to be honest? I hope that made sense. I want to read that again because it was worded very peculiarly. It can even show up. It can even show up in our attempt to love someone who reflects to us the parts of ourselves that we have not yet learned to love. Nisa was that mirror for me. I now understand that what I once interpreted as manipulation or resistance was in truth her way of surviving a reality in which she never felt fully safe to be herself. Her behavior was not a betrayal. It was a code. It was her asking in her own way, can you see me? Even if I cannot tell you the whole truth. Yeah, I see you, daughter. I see you. Sometimes that's all we need to say. We don't need to try to fix it. We don't need to explain. All we need to do is say, I see you. The equivalent of being present. Sometimes they don't even want an answer. Sometimes they just want to know, are you here? Even if in my worst case scenario, my worst case, the way I could show up in the worst case scenario, can you still see me? And our answer is yes, daughter. Yes, son. I see you. Mhm. The bridge to the learning. Now we talk about the emotional dishonesty as a survival strategy, being the spiritual smog of the heart, the subtle, pervasive heaviness that forms when truth has been held hostage for too long. The smog intensifies when what needed to be spoken has instead been buried beneath the layers of performance, shame, or fear. And I think many times we underestimate our children. They are smarter than we realize. They are more spiritually in tune than we realize. And they read us like a book, inside and out. And so they have earned the right to be our biggest critic because they have seen us, the best and the worst of us, right? Spiritual hygiene invites you back to your center. It is not about needing or trying to scrub yourself into perfection. It is about clearing the smog so the truth of your heart can breathe again. Just being open and honest. Like, it's not even about perfection. It's not about making it right. It's about being open and honest. To cleanse this layer does not mean you force disclosure of every secret thought or feeling. It is to invite a request to a safe and sacred release. It is to offer the heart enough safety to speak without being disguised. To walk this path of cleansing, we must build a bridge between the two inner worlds, the world of the mind that justifies and rationalizes, and the heart that yearns to be free. We must carefully structure a bridge between the stories we have told others and the feelings we have never allowed ourselves to acknowledge, between the truth that would heal us and the fears that have kept us silent is the bridge I live on with my daughter, Nisa. All right, give me 1 second. This is a long chapter, you can see. So the next part says unspoken feelings become spiritual residue. And I feel like it's almost like, you know how sometimes you have dust that settles, and when that dust settles and it's not clean for a long time, and then it couples with the different temperature changes in the room, and sometimes when it settles on glass, it becomes like a residue. Like you can't just wipe it with the dry cloth anymore. If it's set too long, it becomes something that needs a little bit of elbow grease, a little bit of a something to sort that residue, something to break down the residue. It's not easily wiped away if it settles. Unspoken feelings become spiritual residue. Nisa did not grow up with the tools to name what she felt or to trust that her needs could be met without performance, drama, or manipulation. Like many of us, the inherited emotional silence as a form of communication. Like many of us, she inherited emotional silence as a form of communication. She learned that feelings were dangerous, inconvenient, or too much to carry or share. And just as I had demonstrated to her, she buried her feelings. And like all things buried alive, they did not disappear, they rotted. Nisa was overweight for most of her life. Her body became a container for what she could not voice: the pain, unmet needs, feelings of rejection, loneliness, and deep self doubt. After being diagnosed with diabetes, she lost a considerable amount of weight, yet the emotional weight remained. She looked different, but she felt the same. This is the brutal cruelty of emotional dishonesty. I disconnects, it disconnects you not only from others, but from yourself. Nisa was a tender soul with a wounded core. She laughed loudly and loved deeply, but rarely, if ever, did she speak honesty about her own inner pain. I am clear that Nisa did not lie maliciously. She lied emotionally. She was twisted or she twisted the truth because it felt safer than revealing her truth. She exaggerated urgency because she didn't believe she was worthy of help. She let situations worsen, perhaps to prove that she mattered, or only through emergency that she mattered, if only through emergency. It was heartbreaking. It was exhausting. It was familiar. Do we know people like that? That always have to create drama. We were talking about that, the gutter snipes, people that live in that energy. It's really a learned behavior. Sometimes it is as a result that like of not getting what you needed growing up. And so we learn what works. And so maybe for many that live in that energy, that's what works for them to get what they need. No judgment, but sometimes that's what it is. And it's sad to say that we have to feel like we have to take everything to the extreme and create drama around it just to get the help that we need or just to feel heard. I resonate with this. There's some part of this that I can definitely understand. Yeah. And so I know that was a lot. That was a whole lot. So let's just recap what we just talked about in the book here, the truth that we bury and the cost of carrying it. Right. So to review, emotional dishonesty is the refusal, resistance, or inability to be emotionally truthful. It often arises from fear, shame, or emotional immaturity. It manifests as withholding, deflecting, or exaggerating, or suppressing what we truly feel, usually because we don't believe our feelings are valid, are safe, or worthy of care. And when that manifests, it could look like saying that you're okay while you're falling apart inside, withholding your needs because you don't really feel like they'll be met. You fear rejection, using emergencies or crises to get attention rather than just clear communication of what is needed, shifting the blame instead of expressing the pain that you're feeling, or pretending not to care when your heart is really breaking on the inside. You may survive by being emotionally dishonest. However, you cannot be spiritually free in this state. Spiritual hygiene requires emotional clarity. Clarity requires honesty. Honesty requires courage. And the key learning here is that most emotional dishonesty is a learned behavior. Even if the reason for engaging is it is made up of unnecessary, even if the reason for engaging is made up or unnecessary, it is a form of protection, often modeled or inherited. It's learned behavior. Then she says, in my life and in Nisa's story, emotional dishonesty was a survival skill. Her stories and roundabout ways of asking for help were adaptations of deep feelings of unworthiness. Beneath her avoidance and manipulation was a sincere desire to be loved without needing to be in danger first. Ooh, that's good. The need to be loved without feeling like you're in danger first, right? The need to be felt and acknowledged and cared for without having to pay for it. What I learned about myself, says Ayanla, and what I suspect was also true for Nisa, is that the three pillars of our emotional identity were shattered early in our lives. The pillars of self worth, self esteem, and self value that forms the foundation of how we perceive, relate to, and care for ourselves, particularly at the level of our heart, collapsed when we were in the womb. Wow. Self esteem is how you feel about yourself based on your self perception and the feedback you have internalized from others. It is how you see, hold, and regard yourself within yourself when no one else is looking. I made up that I was ugly. My brother supported me in this conclusion by teasing me mercilessly about every part of my body, my short hair, my thin legs, my fat lips, and as he would say, that my belly was bigger than my boobs. I was well into adulthood when I decided to shake off these labels and become drop dead gorgeous just because. I continue to wear that label today. Self value refers to the actions and choices that reflect how you treat yourself. This is where self-worth and self-esteem become embodied very early in life. I came to believe that the only way people would like or love me was if I gave them what they wanted or what I thought they needed. Not only did I have to prove my values, but I had to pay. I had to pay you to acknowledge it. I could not have what I wanted because I did not deserve it. I had to accept whatever you gave me because I needed to be grateful for anything and everything. Probably the most damaging aspect of my lack of self value was that I had to remain loyal to people who treated me badly, whether physically or emotionally. When your self value is low, you neglect your boundaries, sabotage your well being, and or seek validation through sacrifice. There's another one of those spiritual loopholes, spiritual um, holes that we can fall into to further exacerbate the damage. We got to be careful of these belief systems that we propagate that don't help in our situations, right? I think the belief should further um, it should further embellish our experience. It should not diminish it. And if that belief that you are holding on to diminishes your experience, we have to take a look at it, y'all. Okay. You do not have to sacrifice yourself to feel worthy. I don't care who said it. Okay. Self worth is the inherent, non negotiable truth that you are valuable simply because you exist. It is how you hold and regard yourself within yourself that determines what you expect in the world. It is not something you earn, it is something you remember. My mother was a raging alcoholic. I often joke saying that the reason I do not have never drank alcohol is because I was drunk in the womb. It is only the grace of the divine that I was not born with fetal alcohol syndrome, but I had enough of other stuff to unpack throughout my life that impacted my self worth. When self worth is low, love feels conditional. You believe you must perform, suffer, prove, or sacrifice to receive love. And I think this is definitely something we can speak to for young people because sometimes when we don't have that solid support teaching or system growing up, we do tend to believe that we have to earn respect, we have to earn love. And it's through experience that we learn that that's not true. However, we get dragged through the mud a little bit before we realize that, before we have the great epiphany. I don't need this, you know? But if we could get to that point through, our experience, we save our children a lot of unnecessary heartache because yeah, that's where that comes from. It comes from a lack of self-value, a lack of self-esteem and self-worth because of like some of the things that we've been taught. And it's not necessarily that we sat them down and said, you got to do this and this and this, but these teachings happen through our relationships as we're raising these young people. The fact that we didn't take time or we neglected certain things that was needed to be dealt with or acknowledged, right? It's an unspoken language that we're talking about here. And it's said that action speaks louder than words. In this case, that does apply. And it doesn't matter that you may, choose to place your spiritual belief above everything else in your life, that still can play as a detriment if you place that above your responsibility to your children, right? It can still yet give that same message that this is more important than you, right? And so we have to be really careful about the message that we're sending. Unfortunately, we don't find out until later on, and we look back and we're like, okay, I could have did that differently. But if you are in a position and you're listening and you're, definitely looking into healing and you haven't had that reflection through your child, reflecting back at you what still needs to be healed, like you're ahead of the game, possibly even in a position to make sure that you do the healing or address these things before it actually becomes an issue. Just because it's not said doesn't mean that the message is not heard. Actions speak louder than words, and we teach through our actions louder than anything else. And so it becomes very necessary. I know one of the things that I used to do with my kids to show that I had a concern for each of them, even though I was super busy, and there was a lot of things that I would do differently. I did understand their need for validation and for to understand that I love you, I care about you, I'm interested and invested in you. I would give them, weekends where they would have me all to themselves. And so I would take each of them out individually. We would take turns. One day I would just go out with my daughter, and she would have me all to herself. We would go do things that we like to do. Then one time I'd just take out one of my sons and we would just go out and would have me to themselves. We would, and so I gave them pieces of me all to themselves because I understood this part. I don't know where I got that from, but there was something that resonated later in life that was necessary. And so I began to do that. Though there are still a lot of other things that was needed, I did the best that I could. But I say that to say that actions speak louder than words. And so if we're able to catch it before it turns into this reflection back at us as what has been unhealed, many times it would be helpful. Okay. But she's saying that through these things, that's how we end up in these situations, right? Through our lack of self-esteem, through the lack of self-value and self-worth, right? These things are as a result of us burying our truth and carrying that lie. Sometimes it turns into um, these things that we see, that we tolerate, that show us that we have a lack of self-value or self-worth or self-esteem, right? And so that's what she's saying. All right. And then talk about the spiritual hygiene for the heart. Like the mind, the heart is a sacred vessel. It is where divine compassion, intuition, desire, and vulnerability intersect. And like any vessel, it must be kept clean. When emotions are hidden, twisted, or withheld, they become stagnant. They harden. Over time, the stagnant energy, smog, causes the roots of connection to rot from the inside out. This is when spiritual hygiene for the heart becomes essential. The various hygiene practices create an energetic release within the heart, which can reestablish emotional clarity. It is not therapy, although I wholeheartedly recommend therapy for those who deeply complicated wounds, for those with deeply complicated wounds. It is a profound process of self-care. So to cleanse the heart, it is necessary to remove the residue of emotional dishonesty established by the unspoken need, the supported grief, the fear masked as indifference, the longing buried beneath performance, and the guilt covered by blame. Spiritual hygiene for the heart requires emotional integrity, a conscious choice to create alignment between what you feel, what you know, and what you express. It took several hours, but I finally figured out how I broke Nisa's heart. She experienced everything I said as personal. It wasn't for her. It was about her and against her. It didn't matter how I said it. She experienced my words as fighting words. It did not matter what I did or how I did it. Somehow she concluded that I either wanted her out of the equation or expected too much. She heard my correction as criticism. She heard my encouragement as a request for her to do more or to be different. Yeah. And that's a misconception that we have to clean up with our kids sometimes by learning how to be present, right? Learning how to be present and just listen. I do that often. Like when I talk to my kids, I'm like, okay, I don't necessarily have to give any suggestions or give any correction or point out that this is not that. Like sometimes just listening, be like, okay, well, let me know if I can support you or if you need any guidance, let me know, right? Just being there. Because I tend to get that too. When I talk, I have a very authoritative voice. I realize that my energy is very authoritative as well. And so I have to recognize that too about myself, and my relationship with people can come off a little bit authoritative, sometimes aggressive. And so I have to become aware of that and explain to them or find a different way to be with them and not always have to, you know, offer a solution or offer some type of expected result, just to be present and listen. Let them talk. And when they're done, it's like, yeah, that's nice. I'm glad you're understanding the process. They didn't ask for a resolution or help. They just wanted somebody to listen. And that's something that I'm learning, the difference between them calling for help, understanding that they need to ask for it if they need it, and don't be afraid to ask. Don't feel like you have to avoid me because you are in a hard position in life. Like, no, I've been there, I've done that. Like, let me know. And there may be things I can help you with, there may not, but that doesn't mean you have to keep yourself away from me. I can be there with you through the process. And so I have to learn that too, because I found that my children received me that way too. Um, Kind of like very authoritative, and everything sounded like a challenge or a rebuttal, right? But it wasn't necessarily that. That wasn't necessarily my intention, but I have to be aware of that, how I'm coming off to them. And sometimes it's just good to just listen and be an available ear. And so Ayana realized that too. This is what she explains, like how she broke her daughter's heart, is being not understanding what she needed. I feel like, yeah, there was a disconnect there. Even the encouragement that she was giving, she said Nisa interpreted that as like a request for her to do more or to be different. That's hard. That's a hard place to be. Um, Now, when we look at practices for emotional honesty and integrity, we talk about the different books and the actions, the classes that Ayana has taken and attended more workshops than she can count. All of them in an effort to clear this spiritual smog of emotional dishonesty. However, she found that none of them, by themselves anyway, offered the full solution. What she found did help was practicing to embrace consistently things that allow those parts of herself to reflect through Nisa to become allies instead of adversities or adversaries. She also shared these practices with us, and she invites us to move slowly and give ourselves permission to be fully present through these processes. And I love this because this is something that I do. I was so surprised when I read this. She calls them daily heart checks too. I love it. I can't remember when I coined that. That has been coined for like almost a decade now for me. And so to see this in this book is just further confirmation of being right where you need to be at the right time in the right space. But she calls them daily heart check-ins, 15 to 20 minutes a day. Close your eyes, place your hand over your heart, breathe deeply for about 3 to 5 minutes. And what that means is feel the air coming in and out of your body for 3 to 5 minutes. Just be conscious of nothing but the air. Close your eyes, the air coming in and out of your body. And then after about 3 to 5 minutes, ask yourself, what are you feeling right now? Ask yourself that. What are you feeling? And then listen. Don't judge what comes up. Whatever you hear, just be present with whatever comes up. Okay. And if it feels appropriate, you can even write down what it is that you're hearing. Okay. If what you write is not kind or loving towards you or anyone else, you can tear it up, you can flush it or burn it, just so that you've gotten those things out and they're no longer trapped in your body unconsciously operating in the background, right? Even that is going to be something that's very valuable for this process as you kind of tap into this honesty, when it comes to the integrity of your feelings. Okay. The second option she gives is 20 to 60 minutes. It's a little bit longer and a little bit more in depth. It says to play some soft instrumental music in the background, Close your eyes, place your hand on your heart again, breathe deeply for about 3 to 5 minutes, and then either pray or meditate softly, asking your heart and your emotional self to speak to you. And then you're going to write a letter from your heart to yourself and let your heart speak directly to your mind and allow what you hear to come through your hand as you're writing. It is okay if it's messy or if it's raw or if it's real, right? That's perfectly okay. And if nothing comes forward, that's okay too. Just go into prayer or meditation again. And then let your heart know that it has your permission to say what the mind has silenced. Then, depending on what comes out, you can burn or bless the letter, and you'll kind of know which one you need to do. Okay, the third option is tear cleansing. Tear cleansing. It's 20 to 60 minutes. Close your eyes, place your hand on your heart. Go ahead and breathe deeply for 3 to 5 minutes and ask yourself, where are your tears? Then sit quietly for a few moments. If nothing comes forward, ask again, where are my tears? And let yourself cry without shame, without having to pull back or crouch down or feel like you're doing something wrong or something's wrong. There's nothing wrong because you need to cry. Tears are sacred. They're the body's ways of releasing spiritual clutter. So don't stop your tears no matter how they come up. Welcome them. Be open to them. They are the rain that softens the hardened heart. Okay, that's the third option that you have. So when we talk about sacred expression, we can also choose one truth a day that you've been avoiding. Give yourself permission to express it gently and clearly. It could sound like, I feel overwhelmed and I need rest. That's what I was feeling this morning. And I gave it to myself too. Or you could say, I was hurt and I didn't know how to say it. Or I need help and I want to ask you directly, right? These are sacred expressions, truths that we may have been avoiding, but we need to give ourselves permission to express it gently and clearly, okay? Yeah. So then she goes into supporting others with emotional dishonesty, okay? When someone you love struggles to be emotionally honest, kind of like her daughter, Nisa, it can be a painful experience. You may feel manipulated, you may feel confused, or even taken advantage of. Spiritual hygiene for the heart teaches us to look beneath the behavior and see the ache under the act. There are ways you can create and hold space for healing without enabling the behavior, right? And one way to do that is to respond to the truth, not the drama. Okay, we're going to see the pain body. It's going to be very active, but we don't have to respond to it. We can just see it. Respond to the truth of it. Gently redirect the conversations to the real feelings. Okay. The other way is to set loving boundaries. I want to help you, but I need you to speak to me truthfully. What's going on here? Tell me. Name the pattern kindly. I notice you often wait until things get urgent. I want to support you before it gets to that point, right? Or you can pray for their clarity, pray for their courage, pray for yourself to release the need to fix them, okay? Because it's not your job. You can be supportive, but you don't hold the weight of that responsibility. They hold that. Your clarity will invite their clarity. Your honesty becomes a demonstration they can follow. Keep in mind that regardless of how sincere your efforts, when it comes to healing emotional dishonesty and clearing spiritual smog from the heart, they have to choose it. There were times I wanted to scream at Nisa, my daughter, just tell her the truth. I would just want to scream at her, just tell me the truth. There were times I did just that. Then I remembered that people only tell the truth when they believe they will be safe once it is spoken. Until the day she took her last breath, Nisa did not believe she was safe with me. As much as it hurts me to acknowledge it, I get it. I really, really do. Oh, I know that hurts. That hurts. And finally, she talks about when the heart is cleansed, love is a natural outflow, an outcome. There is a moment in every healing journey when the truth becomes a balm rather than a blade. This means that truth, your truth, is no longer a burden. It is a transformed, it is transformed into something balm that softens the heart. When you practice spiritual hygiene for the heart, you begin to realize that once felt like betrayal, whatever that was, whether you own emotional dishonesty or someone else's, was at its core a cry for tenderness. As the heart softens, you recognize the manipulation was a mask worn by an unmet need, that the silence you considered a disrespectful disconnection was often a band aid covering shame. The drama that felt so unnecessary was probably grief in disguise. And this awareness marks a sacred reunion of the heart and the soul. It is a joyous return, not to who you used to be, but to the version of you that tells the truth because you want to be free. Nisa taught me this return, not in the way I might have imagined. Excuse me. Nisa taught me this return, not in the way I might have imagined through consistent healing conversations or a dramatic emotional breakthrough. I learned it through the sacred labor of mothering her, witnessing her, being present for her, and ultimately by releasing her. She showed me what happens when emotional pain is buried beneath a thousand silences. She taught me that love must be clear to be clean, that spiritual hygiene is not about being right, it's about being real. Her story, our story, and the ache it carried now lives as medicine in my heart and soul. I loved her just that much, and I think she knows it now. If you're reading this, perhaps there's a version of Nisa in you, a version of you that avoids asking directly, a part of you that fears that your truth will be rejected, a piece of your heartbroken self that waits until crisis comes before you say, I need help. Please know that you are not wrong and you haven't done anything wrong. You are not bad. You are learning how to be emotionally honest in a world that has taught you to lie. You are learning how to tell the truth, not to be rescued, but to be restored. This, my beloved, is holy work, and there is nothing your holiness cannot do. Then she shares a blessing for the wounded heart. May your heart be a place where truth feels safe. May every unspoken sorrow rise gently to the surface and dissolve in light. May you forgive yourself for the way you tried to survive. May emotional clarity become your offering to the divine and for yourself. May love, full hearted, clear, and unwavering, find you again and again within you, through you, as you. And then we go into another opening prayer again. And I know this one was very chunky, very wordy. There's a lot of teaching going on here as she broke down, all of these different things, what it means to be fogged mentally, the difference between emotions and feelings, how sometimes that leads to us not being clear about who we are and what we deserve, not understanding our value, or what it means to have esteem in ourselves or our worth, not knowing those things. So she took a lot of time to break that information down. And so a lot of learning happening here. It's okay to relearn, right? Just because you learn one way doesn't mean you have to stay that one way. Just because you were taught one way doesn't mean that that necessarily is going to be true for the rest of your life. Maybe that served you, to protect you at one point in time when you needed that protection. Well, you're now in a space now where you can set the tone and you're in control of your surroundings, what you accept, what you don't accept, You're now in a place where you're able to dictate your existence and what that will look like. And so, in order to create a more sustainable, energetically aligned lifestyle for you, whatever that would be, some things may need to change, and you are in a position to change it. But along with that comes relearning, unlearning certain things that no longer serve you and relearning the correct way. This is all about living a life that's enjoyable to you, a life that's peaceful if that's what you want. And so spiritual hygiene is all about doing that. The importance of knowing these things, of being aware of self and others and our interaction and responsibility, where that starts and where that ends, right? That's what we're talking about. And so we go into another moment of silence where we receive this information that she just taught us in this lesson about the emotional fog, what that is, how that is accumulated, and how it affects us, and how it distorts our vision and how we see things and how we are experiencing things, and how to actually cleanse that too, so that we can get back to where we're supposed to be, where love is the outcome of this natural flow. And so as we go into the opening prayer, again, either you could close your eyes, consider it a prayer, consider it a meditation, however you internalize that sacred space when you connect with the divine or your source, whatever you call that. And her opening prayer for this particular chapter, chapter 2, says, "Beloved presence of all that is, anchor me now in your peace and perfect wisdom. Today I call forth the sacred flame of courage, not the absence of fear, but the holy willingness to move forward anyway. Let courage rise in me like the morning sun, warming every place within me that feels uncertain or afraid. Divine light of truth, I ask that you clear my mind, wash away the fog of confusion, the heaviness of doubt, and the noise of every voice that does not belong to me. Make my thoughts clear, focused, and honorable. Help me to see with spiritual eyes so that I will choose with sacred discernment. Guide me to speak only what is rooted in integrity and love. I open my hands and my heart now, ready to receive divine instruction so that I will walk in alignment towards my greatest good. Guide me, strengthen me, clarify everything I hold in my mind. May every step I take today be a step towards truth and peace and my own divinity. I ask, I allow, I accept. And it is so. And so it is. Amen. Ashe, Aho. All right. It takes courage, and that's why we're asking here in this prayer and this meditation for the courage to do the work. Especially if the outer appearance looks good, it takes courage to admit that there's some work that needs to be done underneath the surface. Though it looks good and it sounds good, there's yet still some work that needs to be done, and not to be ashamed or embarrassed or too haughty or proud to do that. And knowing that people are depending on us, not just our children, those that we will come into contact with. Maybe you have been aligned with to come into contact to help other people along. Before you help others, you have to be able to help yourself, right? And so this is a very courageous act. Has nothing to do with popularity or having a certain image, right? None of that. This is a deeper work that takes courage. And so that's the reading for today. There's a lot of meat here in this lesson. I hope you enjoyed it. Feel free to respond if this touched you in any type of way. And if you do find yourself in a situation that you definitely know you need to get out of, one that is abusive and life threatening, there are some very explicit things that I read here. There are many different places where you can go to receive help. Okay. You don't have to stay there. Okay. You can walk away at any time. You are worthy of more. Okay. And there is help, whether that, even if it's not coming from your immediate support, that those people that are supposed to be protecting you, right? They may not be present, but there are other avenues that you can take to receive the help and the protection that you need. You don't have to stay there. Okay. And so reach out, let someone know what's going on. Okay. Think about how this could potentially improve the lives of those that are depending on you if you are in that situation. I encourage you to be courageous and to be honest in your situation. And maybe it's not that deep. Maybe it's just something that has been, shoved under the rug like we do so often, and it just continues to send you in loops and cycles. And maybe you are seeing it reflected in somebody that this is an opportunity to free yourself in that way too. Whatever that is, I think we can all resonate in some type of way, shape, or form. Okay. So that is the reading for the day. If you haven't gotten your book and you want to read it, like, I encourage you to go and get it. Your life will be changed. There's no way that you will walk away from this without being touched in some type of way. And it has nothing to do with popularity. I'm going to keep saying that. This is a courageous work that we are doing here. And this is all about cleansing the inside of the vessel, cleansing the inside of the cup. Have you ever picked up a glass and it looked clean on the outside, so you filled it up with water and you began drinking, and you looked and there's like some stuff that's stuck on the bottom and around the edges, and you're like, ew, what is, oh my gosh, I'm going to throw up. Like, it's totally disgusting. It could look perfectly fine on the outside, but until you actually take a good look, we need to take a good look at the inside of that cup just to make sure that we're not going to be drinking from a dirty vessel. It's kind of like that. We can look really good on the outside, and we could have that down pat routines, and this performance can be just immaculate. But what's going on the inside? Because that's going to show up a lot more, and that's going to speak a lot louder than any performance than we can ever give. That's what this is about. That's what this is about. Okay. So, this was a long one. And so I'm going to go ahead and end it here. We'll be back next Sunday for the next chapter, which is chapter 3. The mirror doesn't lie. The sacred work of self-honesty. We're tapping into honesty much deeper. Now that we've identified the fog, the misperception that we have, right? Now we've identified that. We know a little bit more about what that is, how to deal with that, how to cleanse our lenses so that we're seeing clearly. Now we can move towards, taking a look in the mirror and dealing with that truth. So I'll see you next week. Thank you so much. If you are someone who tunes in every week, if you haven't gotten your book, go run and get it. It's about $20 to $30. It will not disappoint. I'll tell you that. Whether you want to read it for yourself or follow along, either way is fine. I invite you to do so, whatever you feel comfortable doing. We are all called to do this work, not because someone is making us do it, not because it's some glorious thing, but because it's going to be beneficial for us, and lead us to a place of more. I really do believe that this is going to give us ways to be freer and to experience more enjoyment out of life. That's my whole reason. There's nothing like having everything set up for your enjoyment and not being able to enjoy it because you are disturbed mentally by everything. There's some healing that needs to be done. You can't even enjoy the lush, beautiful life that you've been given because it's, so that's what this is all about. Spiritual hygiene is just all about attuning to the inside and practicing things that cause us to experience clean living and tap into our inner authority and our divine freedom, right? So that's what this is about. So join us next week. I'm going to end it here. Thanks for stopping by. My name is Leticia, and we'll see you next time. Bye. And of course, there are other videos I'm going to post along here. You can go ahead and watch those if you have not, and those will lead you through progressively to each video. Okay. If you enjoyed this one, you will most definitely enjoy those too. I'll see you guys next time.